Sister Grace. Thank you, Sister Margaret, and all of you for the invitation. It's my privilege and joy to be with you today. I'm going to share something about our Mother Foundress and really about my experience of our Mother Foundress, Blessed Frances Siedliska, Mary of Jesus the Good Shepherd. It's really my discovery, my experience, but each of you has her own experience, something to share about Mother Foundress. And what I am going to present is just my journey with her. But each of you, you have your journey with her. And I'm sure that there are people here in this room that know more probably than I do about Mother Foundress from various reasons. I spent some time studying her writings, 2 years in Rome, when I had a chance to look into the archives and see some more. I had this passion to follow the places she that were familiar to her, that were close to her. So this is part of my personal discovery, exploring things, etc. But I'm fully aware that this is just a part for many reasons. One reason is that her life story was so rich that it's even difficult to cover by one person, everything that she did, everything that she wrote, and all the places she went to, because there was so many and so much of all of this. So we'll look at part of her life, some aspects of her life, but I hope this will help us to really think and reflect, each of us, about our own relationship with Mother Foundress, and our own stories, knowledge, inspirations we have that we draw from her life, her writings, from her person, the way she was. So for me, the inspiration for these presentations, today and tomorrow one, was a sentence from for the Holy Father, Pope Francis. On many occasions, he says that we need to go to the roots to appreciate them in order to move forward. And just recently, I happened to translate one of his introduction to a book about John Paul II from the first part of his life as Archbishop Karol Wojtyła and a priest Karol Wojtyła. And he said, you need to know Karol Wojtyła before you understand and see who is the Pope, who is Pope John Paul II. And like here, we need to go back to see our Mother Foundress and to understand her. It happened so that her life could be divided nearly into two equal parts. The 30 lives that she spent with her family as a lay person, and another 30 years, not quite 30, but nearly 30, that she was a religious person and a founder of congregation. So we will be looking into parts today. The first meeting, I'll concentrate on her family life, and the second, we'll talk about her religious life. Is it okay with you? Yes. And can you hear me? Because I know that I tend to sometimes speak too low or something, so please protest. Okay. So that's explanation. So we move back. You know a lot of facts from her life. I'll be referring to some and maybe sharing some you know, just reminding us, or maybe adding something new. So when we talk about her today in this presentation with her family life, we'll be talking about 3 places. Rożkowa Wola, when she was born, Żdżary, when she lived, Warsaw, when she lived. And you have to remember that really, we sometimes think that, and also we in Poland, we think that, Żdżary is her place where she lived. But actually, she lived there half of the time, because the other half of the time she spent in Warsaw. because that was so important, especially winters, but not only. Sometimes there were different seasons. So we concentrated on 3 places, and I did my personal research in Warsaw, really discovering and trying to, some of the places we already knew, but some of the places I discovered that were connected with her, so I'm going to present also that. So we're going now to Rożkowa Wola, we're going to Żdżary, and to Warsaw. During that period, she also spent 5 years abroad because she was poor, her health was poor, so her parents decided to take her abroad to some places with good climate for her. Intentionally, it was to be a short period of time. But because of the political situation in Poland, it turned out to be 5 years. And I think these years are also important. I won't be talking here about them. But they are important from that point of view that she was in many countries. She was in France, she was in Italy, she was in Germany. Of course, the political situation was different. I'm using today's names. So she had the chance to meet various cultures, various religious tendencies, inspirations, and I think also to improve her languages that she spoke a number of. She spoke, from her home, she spoke French, and I think she was most fluent in French. Then she knew German, she knew a bit of Russian. She spoke Italian very well, but I think that she improved that while a religious person. And she learned English during her visitations to the States, her trips to the States, already as a religious, as a founder of the congregation. So, and she used all of those languages in her writings and in communications. And yeah, and there is the story about languages also in As Little Flowers. I know that there was a certain place that she wanted to open a house in present-day in Ukraine, and it didn't succeed. But before she started to learn the language spoken there, and she asked another sister who's going to be the first one to go to learn the language of that area, because she said, even if I don't learn anything, it's nice to say to people something in its language. So it's just an introduction. And we are going back to her birthplace, to Rożkowa Wola. And these are children during one of the events that are held in Żdżary and Rożkowa Wola, putting together the image of our mother foundress. That's what we are just doing. She lived there for 12 years. They were the first 12 years of her life. And when you open her diary, one of the very first sentences you'll find about Rożkowa Wola is that she didn't like this place. And why she didn't like it? Because she said there was no church. She couldn't pray there. And and that's something, because with time you'll see that it'll change. So probably now she likes this place. At least people there liked her very much. That was a property, an estate that was bought by her father, and they lived there. And at one point, her mother inherited part of property in Żdżary that belonged to her brother, the uncle of Mother Foundress. He suddenly died. So her grandfather decided to give it to Cecilia. And so the family moved to Żdżary. Apparently that was a bigger place than Rożkowa Wola estate. And probably also better. And there was a church. And and what we have in the slide I didn't tell, the Rożkowa Wola was sold by a father of our mother foundress after the uprising of 1863, because he was somehow involved in helping the uprisers, and the uprising wasn't successful, so the Russian kind of occupation, partition, the Russians made him pay contributions, otherwise he would be sent to Siberia or something. So that's why. And at that point, Mother Foundress said that she's going to be a religious anyway, so she doesn't need a dowry or something to, you know, to get a good husband. So that's what happened. So today, there's no property as such, and there is nothing left of the property. We know that this is more or less this place. And behind those barns, there was a manor house that they lived. There is people who live there. They say they have old bricks, so we have one of those, a couple of those old bricks, but we are not sure they really come from the old manor or not. Could be. It was somewhere there. And now, according to Mother dream and wish, across the street, as a gift for her, for the beatification, the local people built a chapel in honor of our Mother Foundress. So it was opened in the year just after the beatification. So they were already ready for the beatification with this chapel. Now it was given to our congregation. It belongs to us. And we keep it as a place for, if you wish to do it, a kind of a desert place. There's a little flat, two or three rooms with a kitchen just next to the church, and sisters, when they are really tired with a lot of people with their work, etc., they can go there for quiet time for a day, 2 or 3. So this serves like this now. And also for sometimes for young people. And it's there. This is the chapel. Some of you were there. This is the chapel inside. With the picture you have in the main altar is the beatification picture that was in Rome. Okay. And as I said, local people are very attached to our Mother Foundress. There is this. One of the sisters who lived there was trying to talk to people, arrange something, and they all remember the old ones that are gone now. They remember that there was this good lady from the manor who they remembered her dearly. I mean, that was a nice memory among people. So people are they're really very happy that they have their own saint, and she's very popular among the local people. Each year we have a pilgrimage, walking pilgrimage from Rożkowa Wola to Żdżary. Local people take part, and also many other people, many sisters that come from various places, various provinces also. So that was Rożkowa Wola. She didn't like because there was no church, and now there is church. Now we moved to Żdżary. Frances lived with her parents and a brother in a large wood manor surrounded by a beautiful park. We know it. This is the old drawing of the manor house. We have some souvenirs from the manor house, some, like pots, dishes, some equipment of the house that was given by the family to us. But the manor itself, the house itself, doesn't exist. Local people put this memory stone in that place. So this is just next to the place the manor house used to be. And let's see at the back. After the Second World War, on the foundations of their house, the local authorities built a public school. Now the public school is named after our Mother Foundress. You can see that there's also a table on the wall. And in old different writings you can find that there was a nice alley of chestnut trees leading from the manor to the church. In Mother Foundress's times, it was much, the trees weren't so old like in this picture, but it's the alley leading to the church. The park itself is very neglected. It's not a park anymore. Some of it was turned into the schoolyard. The rest is really neglected, but just to give you a glimpse how what it looks like today. There were ponds, there were different types of trees. If you're very careful and if you're good at biology, you still can find some kind of exotic for this part of the word trees, brought from somewhere else. So it must have been a park that was well maintained. Now, the business in Żdżary was a big one. I didn't realize until I saw this letterhead. I talked to one of the descendants of Mother Foundress's family, and she was showing various things that remained, among them this letterhead that Adam Siedliski used, brother of Mother Foundress, who later inherited Żdżary. And also there were other issues. There were like finance books, there were maps and things like that. And it was really a big farmland you see in the picture. Okay, it was called in Polish folwark, and whole business. Okay, estate by Siedliski's folwark consisted of manor house. We saw it, farmland. Cattle and pig farms, red cattle, I found out. Outbuildings, mills, distillery, other workshops, and also there was a place for the workers to live. Okay, Mother Foundress belonged to nobility. They were estate owners, but people who worked, they were village people. Some of them maybe could come for work, and they had their little farms on their own, but some didn't have any property. And those who didn't have property, usually they lived in provided space for them, provided houses. So there were also such houses here. Stables in the old pictures, Siedliski stables, and now the buildings looks like that. Unfortunately, most of the buildings were also destroyed, because now there is a great business of a different sort there. So they're rebuilding, they're changing the buildings. They bought this part of property. So it's going to be probably missing soon. But if you look carefully, there are certain things that remained, like this gate, original. And then we have Żdżary Parish Church. You know all that it was founded really, by Joseph Morawski, her grandfather on mother's side. I'm going to talk about him more because he was a very important person in my Mother Foundress's life. This church is still there. Behind the church we have now a convent and a retreat center. Inside of the church you can see, and I wanted to show the inside of the church just to note, to make you realize that, you know, whatever we see, wherever we are, these things shape us. And it's interesting to see that for Frances Siedliska, Jesus the Good Shepherd was someone special. And it's there in this church. She must have contemplated this image and somehow it must have speak to her. When she was leaving Stare, when they left, they moved, she knew she's not going to return there. She wrote that, she's going to miss this church because it was dear to her. She liked to pray there. There were different times, because sometimes not always the parish priest was very supportive. We know that they had some fights. He didn't understand why she's so pious and her mother is so pious, why she's so religious, why she wants to practice so much. But still, the church played an important role. It was a place for prayer to her, for discerning a lot of things. That she really discovered her vocation in Stare. So this place must have played a great role. So Jesus the Good Shepherd, and she was very musical, you know about it. She played the organs in that church. And as Jesus the Good Shepherd is, as you see, I think you can see it above the ambons, right? So you could see it very well from the level of the organs of the choir place. And the table you see was funded by her father, Adolf, in honor of the grandfather who founded this church. It's in the church. In the church we have this picture of her, the painting in one of the side altars, showing her, and in the background the church itself, so to say that she prayed there, and the organs she used to play. So we now move to Warsaw. As I said, I would say that I didn't count it very, very precisely, but I would say half of the time she would spend in Warsaw, especially when her grandfather was still alive. Her mother was very much attached to him, so they would travel for winter. When her mother was not well, she felt more secure in Warsaw. So she spent a lot of time. She lived in many places, and we will see some of them. Some of them it's impossible even to find because there are no data, we'll say that. The picture on the background is the postcard from the 19th century, but it's a bit of a fake because this postcard is a bit later. It's from the end of 19th century, and she was in Warsaw in the mid-19th century. So the first place is where she was baptized, and it's an interesting story, very complicated. For a long time, sisters had a wrong idea where she was baptized because she was baptized in her parish of St. Andrew Apostle, and that's where we have the parish registers and her baptism registered. But she wasn't baptized in that church because it was erected a bit later. That parish used different churches. They had its own church, which was very small. So they, in a way, hired a church from Franciscans. And Franciscans' church used to serve as for this purpose, for parish church on that parish that grew. Warsaw was growing. There were more and more people living in Warsaw, coming to Warsaw. So, that's why. And because it happened just in a short period of time, for a couple of years, we didn't realize that. But this is really the church when she was baptized. I would like to also draw your attention to one more fact. She was born on November the 12th. We all remember that. And we know all that she was born very sick. And then on November the 20th, she was baptized. Such a small baby, risking death very sick, was brought by her parents to Warsaw to be baptized, 80 kilometers about, and they didn't have cars. Okay, they had horse carriages. So just imagine this. Why they brought her to Warsaw? This church, St Andrew's Church, St Andrew's Parish, not this church, was the parish church of Joseph Morawski, her father, where the family spent a lot of time. So that's probably why. It was the nearest church. It's very near to the place her grandfather lived. Again, I was trying to do some comparison, showing the place, how it looked like in the 19th century. And nowadays, I'm not going to talk about the differences, what changed, because it doesn't matter so much in this moment, but to have just an idea. And this is the copy of her baptismal certificate. I managed to get this copy thanks to one of the sisters who was so kind to share it with me, and Sister Clara. And it's from her diary. According to my baptismal certificate, I was born on November the 12th, 1842. I was baptized at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on November the 20th, the eve of the presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary in the temple. I was given the names Frances and Josephine. Now, the names. Frances is her own name, okay? Seems so. Anne was her grandmother on mother's side. Frances was her grandfather. Josephine. Joseph was her grandfather. So these two other names are after her grandparents. I was to have been a weak child and destined for an early death. The attending doctors gave little hope for my survival. I was the first child of my parents, Adolf and Cecilia Morawska Siedliski. They were deeply grieved that God, having given them a child, would take it away, so soon. But how differently you have decreed, my Lord, not at all in accord with human foresight or judgment. That comes from her autobiography. And this register book is now kept in this church, the proper church of the St Andrew's parish. And this church, Mother Foundresses knew. She wasn't baptized there, but it was erected a couple of years later. She was still a child, so she attended this. You can find it in her diary that she writes about the church. She was there. Probably many times, maybe they went for Mass here, I think. But one of her visits to that church was a very particular one, and I'm going to talk about it. Okay, this is the inside of the church, the baptismal font, but of course she wasn't baptized in that font, but there is a plate commemorating that in this parish she was baptized. She was taken there by her aunt, as I remember well, to that church for her first confession. And unfortunately, it wasn't successful. And I'm going to read this passage from her autobiography, just for you to realize how difficult experience, how stressful experience must have been for a young girl like that. It's 1854. Father Jan Dziubacki prepared me for my first confession, which I made in 1854 in Warsaw, in the church of St. Charles Borromeo, before Canon Topolski. I felt in my soul that this was a very solemn and serious moment, but I did not understand what I was doing. I was driven to the church by Mom's aunt, a very pious, holy person. I was fasting, thinking that maybe I would take communion. When I was left in the sacristy, alone with this priest, I was so frightened that I did not confess all my sins because of the shame and fear that gripped me. I also lost the piece of paper when they were written down. The Father Canon hesitated whether or not to allow me to receive the Holy Communion, but the Lord Jesus, in his infinite mercy, made him not allow it, but told me to return in a few weeks. And we know from a story that she didn't return in a few weeks. Actually, she had to wait a whole year before the next confession and the Holy Communion. And she was really yearning, longing for that, very much so. And finally, her confessor was Father Lenjan, and became her confessor for a long time. And also her first real confession, let me say. But this is the story connected with this church, and as you see, not everything in a holy people's life was successful. And now this is a very important place. This is a very important place for us, and it is a very important place for Warsaw now, because we are now just right in front of the palace, that is the headquarters of the President of Warsaw and the Warsaw Voivodeships. So President Trzaskowski's offices are here. And it used to be the palace of the Government Commission of Revenue and Treasury of the Kingdom of Poland. And because Joseph Morawski was the director of that commission. And some places you can see that he was the Minister of Finances. And some people say it's true, some people say it's not true. In a way, it is true, because at that time Poland was under partition, and so-called the Kingdom of Poland got some autonomy from the Russian authorities, from the Tsar. So there was a government that had some autonomy. They didn't have all the powers that the normal government of the independent country has, but they could do some. And for Joseph Morawski, it was kind of a love for Poland, for his country, because he believed by doing something, even collaborating with the Russians, is good, because we can, somehow work for the nation, for Poland. So that's why he got involved. He wasn't very rich. What he achieved was through his talents and hard work. So he first served by the first Ministry of Finances, I'll call it Ministry of Finances, and he was doing well. So when the first Ministry of Finances died, he was chosen to be the one. And so he is very influential. He was part of the government of the Kingdom of Poland. This, as I say, it wasn't an independent country, it was an autonomy, but still it was a very important position. He lived in that palace because they had a section, like a residence. You could see it in the old picture. I couldn't get this part. It's on the right from that round thing, because that was there was a bank and all the financial institutions in one place, a huge complex, and a part of palace. It was destroyed in the war, but then later it was rebuilt. So we look at a thing that is pretty much the same, looked the same. So she lived here she writes like this. Since my mom was constantly ill, we lived with my grandfather in Warsaw. His other daughter, older than Mom, Nowaszewska, also stayed there with her entire family, 3 daughters and a son who was 3 years older than me. So she got other kids to play with. And then she writes exactly about this place you see in the picture, the porch. In the evening, walking on the big porch with my little brother, I told him that we should both go to preach the Lord Jesus to pagans somewhere in distant countries, convert souls, and die a martyr's death for the Lord God. We also know that later in life, when she was a foundress of our congregation, she personally took care of finances. She would make decisions. She would make different investments. Whatever, especially when you read the story, the book of Sister de Chantal, you see that she arrived in the States, and she would, and also in her notes, that she would make order of the things that were confused in finances, in agreements, contracts. So she had this once gift, and second, I think she got some education at home from her grandpa. Also, her grandfather, her father, running such a big business, had to have some knowledge about it. He was also a member of a society for these estate owners, very important ones. So sometimes he also traveled to Warsaw on business because he was a board member of this society, and they had meetings in Warsaw. So I think this is the part of her education from home. She was very well educated. As I said before, languages. She had private lessons, her governess, so her education was perfect. And she also had a music education, which was proper for that time, but she had to have some ear, and her father had to have an even better ear, because when she played, she could hear when something is not, she didn't play it perfectly. She would scold her off and, told her to practice more, to play better. So I think she got this talent from her father and from training. And Warsaw was a good place because, as I said, they were nobility, they were not village people. So they could be, as it was said, in the society, meaning meeting people of their rank, making connections, especially if they run the business. Something about this place. But before I do that, I wanted to say one more thing, which is also maybe not widely known among us. And I think there was even a time when sisters were unwilling to tell about it, they would cover this. But her grandmother on mother's side was Jewish. She was daughter of a very wealthy, one of the wealthiest merchants of Warsaw. Still there is a district in Warsaw that is called Szmulowizna after his name, because his nickname was Szmul's Budkower. And so I think it was probably some kind of an arrangement between the two, because this way this Jewish merchant could be more important, having his daughter married to a nobleman and the Ministry of Finances later. And for him, it would give him probably some financial resources, because he wasn't rich from home. So, but still, I think he had some respect for his wife, and I'll tell you why later. And so I don't think it was just purely business, but I don't know. I don't know. Anne died before Mother Foundress was born, died early. So Mother Foundress didn't know her, although she was named after her. And also, her mother was still very young when her mother died. This might explain why Mother Foundress's mother didn't make a good mother, and we know about it. She didn't pay attention, she didn't care enough for her. She left her to governesses and servants. She didn't, there's this one sad story in Żdary when Mother Foundress was in her room, as a little Frances was in her room, and there was a storm at night and she was scared. So he ran to her grandma, to her mom, and mom sent her away. Didn't hug her. Didn't, you can imagine. Frances had really better relationship with her father, better emotional relationship with her father than mother, although the religious matter she shared more with her mother. But emotionally, she was more attached to her father, there's no doubt about it. And then things changed. Grandfather, Joseph Morawski went for health reasons to Carlsbad, to rest, to take care of his health. Carlsbad is Karlowe Vary today. And suddenly, unexpectedly, he died there. Nobody expected that. It was a sudden death. He was brought to Warsaw. And now Mother Foundress writes herself in her autobiography what it meant for the family. After my grandfather's death, everything changed so much that we wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. When a new minister, Mr. Leski, was appointed, and he and his entourage, whom I knew, had already taken up residence in this palace, I noticed that those who had formerly bowed to us were now bowing to him. I was strangely pained by this. I felt that we had fallen lower, that through my grandfather's death, my family would not have the importance it once had. I ached over all of this, but I also regretted the palace, those rooms and huge salons, drawing rooms, where we spent my childhood years so happily. So she liked this place. It was painful when she had to leave, but it also made her reflect. Very close to that palace, there is the Saxon Garden. It's the first public park in Warsaw, opened since the end of 18th century. So we are now in 19th century, by one of the Polish kings. Again, the postcard from 19th century and present day picture, and it was a place for walks. It is a place for walks. It looked differently. This fountain that you will see was there in the 19th century, but later, when Mother Foundress was adult, so probably as a child she didn't see it, but it's very characteristic of the place. And that's what she writes about it. I was extremely fond of going for a walk. Then once, when during a religion lesson, my aunt wanted me to go for a walk with her on a sledge, which was the greatest joy. I immediately refused, so as not to miss a moment of the lesson. So it says that she used to go for sledge drive in that park. They had also a skate rink there, a theater, all sorts of recreation utilities. And another quotation, I was so thoughtful after the first communion that Mother had me led for a walk in the garden so that I would cheer up a bit. Walking through the shady avenues of the Saxon garden, I thought of my Lord and the guest of my soul, whom I would be happy to keep in my heart. So it was also a place where she reflected. Now, the first communion, this is the Capuchin Father's church in Miodowa Street. She was very often in that church because Father Lander lived in the convent by it. So she went for confession in this church, and she had her first communion here. And an interesting thing that I found is that because she was so little as a child, Father Leander would confess her, making her sit next to him in the pew in the church, which I think was very modern for that time. Okay. So here we have some quotations from her autobiography about this church. The priest whose entrance into our home the Lord God used for my conversion was Father Leander Lędzian, a Capuchin priest. Since we did not have any contact with the Capuchin fathers in Warsaw, the Lord God made a lady, an acquaintance of my mom's, to strongly urge her to get to know this priest who had begun to be somewhat famous in Warsaw because of the holiness of his life, preaching, and eloquence. In the end, Grandpa applied to Father Benjamin Szymański, the Commissioner General, like a provincial, I think, of the Capuchin Fathers in Poland, for Father Leander to prepare me for my first Holy Communion. And you don't refuse the Minister of Finances, right? So that's the story, basically. And really, I found in Capuchin Fathers essays on story, that really there were three important preachers in 19th century. Among them, one of them was Honorat Koźmiński, who became blessed, and one was Father Leander. So he must have been a well-known person, kind of like now we have these fashionable preachers that everybody likes to listen to. An important information, there was a crowd of people in this church because that year, for the first time in Warsaw, a May Day devotion was held in honor of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and at the same time a beautiful stone statue of the Immaculately Conceived Virgin Mary was placed in front of this church. And this is the statue you can see. So that was placed there on her of the day of her first communion. Because of the large crowd, the Commissioner General of the Order allowed us to pass through the choir of monks to the sanctuary and kneel on the steps of the altar. So it was free. Moreover, I saw nothing and no one. And my Lord Jesus, the dearest, the only, the most beloved, entered my heart. As I received him, half conscious of emotion, love, and joy, I bowed down. What happened around me after that, I don't know. I only remember that they had to move me, to bring me back to life. So I think it was kind of first mystic experience in her life, which really was an inspiration, or further inspiration to respond wholeheartedly to Jesus, and her desire to devote all her life to Jesus, not share it with anyone else. And the sacrament of confirmation, another interesting place. We could talk a lot about it. She had her confirmation just a month later, a month and 8 days, on June 8th, on the Holy Trinity. And again, grandfather's connection helped. This is the church wow, the church, yeah, here, of the Benedictine nuns of the Blessed Sacrament, Newtown Market Square in Warsaw. They had kind of a school, like a pension, where the schools, the nobility girls educated. They ran it. It's a cloistered convent. They are cloistered nuns, but still in the 19th century they helped this way the society. They were very patriotic that they would educate Polish nobility daughters. They had a section that they stayed all the time. So Mother Foundress was confirmed together with these groups of girls, again thanks to grandfather's connections. Let's maybe listen to what she says. On the solemnity of the Holy Trinity, June the 8th, between 4 and 5 in the afternoon, I received the sacrament of confirmation. Since my grandfather was in friendship with Archbishop Fiałkowski and also a benefactor of the Sister of Blessed Sacrament in Warsaw, Mom and I were given permission to go through the cloister, and from the nuns' choir we went out to the church where the Archbishop confirmed the girls of the boarding school and others. At the confirmation I received the name Mary, which I chose for myself. Before the very end of the service, we were called inside the convent where the Archbishop was received. Here again a new joy. I was inside the convent. I saw those walls, corridors, the choir and nuns. This had always been my dream. Despite my love for the religious life, I somehow felt that neither my time had come yet, nor was the place for me. So it made a great impression on her, but at the same time she knew it was not for her. It's interesting to know that during this very time when she was confirmed, there were two famous Polish writers taking their education there, and it's very probable that they were confirmed together. One was Eliza Orzeszkowa, another one Maria Konopnicka. And they were her age, really. One was exactly her age, the other one was a year senior, I think, if I remember rightly. And I found... Okay. This was the convent in the 19th century, a bit later, but still. Entrance to the convent nowadays. And I found this piece about the convent written by Orzeszkowa. So she wrote, we can see it, it's her diary, we can see it through the eyes of a girl, Mother Foundress at Mother Foundress's age. So it's really nice to compare, and you can then imagine what kind of impression Mother Foundress could have of the place. So she writes that from my almost 5-year stay at the Blessed Sacrament Sisters boarding school, I have only good memories. The convent was vast and beautiful, filled with many large and small corridors, halls, stairways, courtyards, and huge garden cascading down several terraces towards the Vistula River. Although I did not fully realize it then, the picturesque and melancholic views of the monastery left a deep impression on me. The courtyards were surrounded by high walls with barred windows from the nuns' cells and lush lawns with spreading trees everywhere. There were shrines, chapel, niches filled with flowers, statues, and candles or lamps that burned eternally. It was a place of half darkness, half colors, with dim glimmers of silver and bronze, full of flowers and the scent of incense. Within the monastery itself, I was overcome by deep sadness at the sight of corridors engulfed in darkness. The sound of choral chants from some distant place, the striking of bells, or the clock in the middle of the night. There were various paintings and wall frescoes which left me with an impression that I could not understand at that time. So we'll look at that place. We are in the Church of the Canonesses. Interesting order. This place was very important for Mother Foundress in her religious life. That's the first step in her religious life as a consecrated person. The church you look at, the present-day church, is the replica that was built there in 1990s, 91 exactly, trying to reconstruct the old church that was destroyed in the World War and after the war. And Mother Foundress spent her retreat, 1 month of a retreat, which concluded with taking her vows, her first religious vows. They were private vows in a way that they weren't, you know from the story that she took her vows several times because of the formal procedures that were used, the canon law that was used in the church. But this was her deep intention, and for her it's the beginning of her religious life. So that's why this place is so important. And we hear a letter of Mother Laureta Lubowicka. No, her kind of memories. Her Mother Foundress at about 32 years. At about 32, following the advice of Father Leander on July the 2nd, 1873, took 3 vows in the Church of the Canonesses, who are lay persons leading a life of piety, but in private. The vows referred to above are the usual vows of poverty, obedience, and chastity, since she already considered herself a nun, although the congregation was not yet founded. And why this place? I think there are many reasons for that. One is a very practical one. This place was close to Miodowa Street when Father Leander lived. So he led the retreat for her. So he lived nearby. It was easy for him to come and give her instructions, etc. It was also easy to be here for practical reasons because she was kind of inside with that community. And this community was really exceptional because this was a community for lay person. Lay, it wasn't a religious order, meant for nobility and aristocracy. Those daughters in those noble and aristocratic families that had probably more children and they couldn't afford dowry for each child. So there would be always those young women who be kind of privileged and not privileged, right? Privileged by birth but not privileged in real life. So this was invention on one of the aristocrats. That lady followed the French example and she founded this society. They could live together and they had 3 choices. They could stay there for some time and later find a husband and lead a different life. They can choose a real religious life. And the third, they can stay there till the end of their lives. So there are different choices. To be one of them, you had to prove that you are nobility by birth or aristocracy by birth 4 generations back. So not everybody could be part of it. But these ladies, they did a wonderful work, a charity work, and all sorts of works, because they lived together, they prayed together, but each of them had freedom, and because they came from, nobilities, aristocracies, they had connections, and they could do a lot. So they did social work, charity work, all sorts of work. It's just exceptional. I'm not going to talk long about them now, but I think for that purpose, it was also a good place for discernment, because there were ladies who were discerning their lives, okay, whether they want to stay or not, etc. So, unfortunately, as I said, the place was destroyed, and it was destroyed in the World War II during the Warsaw Uprising, but even more after the war, when Poland got under the communist rule, and religion was not seen as a good thing, and aristocracy and class divisions, that was, all the bad things in one place. So they didn't allow to rebuild the church, and the society doesn't exist anymore. They couldn't. And that happened after 200 of their functioning as such society. So booster. After she took her vows here, that was, remember, July, she went to Lublin to meet these ladies that were supposed to join her at the beginning to create the congregations, and then she traveled to Rome. So that's really, a starting point, a very important point, I think. Now we're moving back a little bit in time. You remember the year 1855. She had her first communion, confirmation in June, and in August her grandfather died. So they lost this place to live in Warsaw. But her mother couldn't imagine not living part of the time in Warsaw, and also I think it was practical for her father. So they looked for different apartments, and we know that there were several places. And there are places before she traveled abroad for these 5 years for health reasons. And after she returned, there were also several places they hired in Warsaw when they lived. We cannot tell about every place because we don't know where it was. There's no evidence. But there are 2 places that we can identify more or less. One is this one. This is in Długa Street, near Krasiński's garden in Warsaw. Again, you have the view of the church, which is nearby. That in Mother Foundress's times was changed by the Russians into a Russian Orthodox church. You see the different towers, right? They placed different towers, domes over it, and that's the street nowadays. And I was looking through sources, 19th century sources about this Długa Street and Mother Foundress's writings. And I managed to find that there are only 2 houses that could match this description Mother Foundress left us. And this is one of them. Of course, I'm not sure if this the right, but it gives you some idea how it might look like. I mean, this is the house behind the fountains. This one is the Krasiński's Palace in 19th century and nowadays. And the park was behind this palace. And our Mother Foundress writes, Mom was still weak. After completing all inheritance matters after my grandfather's death, my parents decided Mom would spend the winter in Warsaw. I was pleased about this because I was terrified of any departure so as not to lose the spiritual guidance of Father Lander. And I asked the Lord Jesus very much for this. So my parents rented an apartment on Długa Street with windows overlooking Krasiński's garden. So that house, for example, is one of the 2 houses that matches the description. Another place that was very dear to her, that she liked, is the Basilica of the Holy Cross in Krakowskie Przedmieście Street. Place of prayer for her. I'm going to tell more about it later. Just the present view of the Basilica. We'll see now 19th century view. And she writes, Daddy wanted us to go to Warsaw. He had us rent a beautiful furnished apartment. I was to be out in the world, meaning meeting, going to various meetings, social meetings, to find a husband, right? This was the intention. And get to know people. They were to get to know me too, and the goal was to force me to marry. Mom explained to Dad that I didn't show any desire for it, that I was so weak. But I was already 17, and so it was high time to choose a state for myself. So that's the place. We don't know exactly where the apartment was, but we know that the apartment was close to this church. Her father wouldn't allow her to go to the church, so she would do things like take with her governess in the morning for a walk, not having breakfast because you couldn't receive the Holy Communion when you had before something. So she would go for a walk without her breakfast, skipping breakfast in order to attend a mass in this church. And also she prayed in this church. She mentioned 2 favorite altars, or places rather, in that church that was dear to her. That word. And she writes like this. At first, I was interested in this beautiful apartment, this sort of Royal style. But what a sadness. I was without a confessor, without any advice or help. Thanks to the Lord, not far from us was the Church of the Holy Cross, which was very dear to me. Large, high, dark. It was so good to pray in it. I began to go there, especially the altar of the Blessed Sacrament and the chapel of the Blessed Mother were strangely dear to me. This is the chapel of Blessed Mother, as you see. Poor Papa immediately began to forbid us religious practices. He said that it was not necessary to go to Mass, so it was not always possible to go, only after breakfast under the guise of a walk. I joined the Holy Cross Church with my teacher. And as you could hear from her autobiography, at that time she didn't have a confessor because the father Leander was moved from Warsaw to Nowe Miasto near Żar, so he was not there. So she was looking for a confessor, and she found one in the present day in the cathedral, in Warsaw Cathedral, St. John Warsaw Cathedral. And this is the cathedral. In the past, in Mother Foundress's times, it looked different because it was totally destroyed during Warsaw Uprising, World War II. There was a front line going through the church, so only one wall remained. And while they reconstructed it, they decided to reconstruct it in a original style, which is the Mazovian Gothic of the church, leaving aside later additions and alterations. So we'll listen to what she writes. Also following an inner inspiration, I decided to go to confession to a very saintly priest, Canon Paul Rzewuski. It was very far from us, St. John's Church, but I went there, and on Ash Wednesday I had my first confession before this priest. At first, he advised me to listen to my parents, but when I told him what advice I had from Father Leander, what I felt, he thought deeply and said to me, if you have the courage for this, fight. If you have the courage for this fight, then fight. The Lord Jesus granted me that he was very supportive in everything, and even in few things when I had doubts, he encouraged me to preserve. I was just recently listening to a conference of one of the Capuchin fathers who was really studying things in mother founders, and he said that this confessor was a very wise one, but he said about Father Leander that he was kind of too controlling over her. And well, of course, we look from 21st century perspective. 19th century perspective was different, and I'm going to talk about it later on during one of our conferences, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. And just to, her choice was very good, because I think this priest was really saintly. He was nominated in the absence of the bishop who was sent to Siberia, was Archbishop of the Diocese, to Siberia by Russians, who was too Polish, okay? He was nominated to be the next bishop, but and actually was in charge of Archdiocese when there was no bishop, and the Russian authorities didn't agree for him to be the bishop. And he was also sent to Siberia. And I know there are some sources saying that that was really a person, extraordinary person, really pious, and also having the strength against various difficulties, hardships. In her autobiography, she also mentions other churches. One is the church and convent of the Visitation Nuns on Krakowskie Przedmieście. You can see it in the two first pictures. They're cloistered nuns. She wanted to have her retreat, a long retreat. That was when she returned from this trip abroad, but her parents didn't let her. They were afraid that she'll stay there, so they didn't let her. But still, if she wanted to make a retreat there, means she knew the place. And the Carmelite Church of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary on Leszno Street, it's not a Carmelite anymore. It was near their house. They had a confessor and a priest who came with masses to the place when she lived nearby. And this place is on Alexander Church on Three Crosses Square. Her brother had a priest who was a vicar in this church that was preparing him for sacraments. So she also visited this church. And this church, there is, you see, another picture that's Angela Marie, Superior General, uncovering the picture of Mother Foundress there. So she's there now. And the oldest cemetery in Warsaw, Old Powązki Cemetery, is also important for us because there are family tombs of the Siedliski's family. And we know Mother Foundress was there. She was certainly for the funeral of her grandpa, and maybe some other times probably, because we go to cemeteries, especially in November. Francis' grandfather, Joseph Morawski, is buried in a tomb. And also there are buried cousin of Blessed Maria Frances Siedliska, and the grandson of Joseph Alexei Morawski. Joseph Morawski and his wife Victoria Jerzewski. The other inscriptions are completely destroyed. For us, an important thing is that the grandfather is buried there, and probably some other family members. I must tell you one thing. Whenever I visited the cemetery, it always struck me that this tomb is so different than all of the other tombs in that old cemetery. You saw the previous pictures; they look different. There are artistic, but nothing like this. I said, it's very different, it's very strange. And I had some idea, but I wasn't so sure, and I didn't want to speak out what I had in mind. Unless one time I went to Jewish cemetery nearby, old Jewish cemetery, and I saw a tomb exactly like this, just smaller. This is big. So, another hint that I had, that one of the obituaries that were published in press after Joseph Morawski's death, who was a prominent person, said that he was buried in the family tomb, which means that the tomb was already there. It wasn't built later. It must have been there. So my idea is that Joseph Morawski prepared this tomb for his wife, who, when he married her, she had to change her religion. She couldn't be married to a nobility person, being a Jew, and they probably had a sacrament of marriage. So, but I don't know how much she really changed her religion in her heart. So I think this is kind of, showing the respect for his wife past. Okay, and you see this is like a hill, and you have Moses tables. Of course, there is a cross, but yeah. And I want you to listen to what Mother Foundress writes about it. I will never forget what impression I experienced upon arriving in Warsaw. I was 13 at that time. This terrible mourning, the sadness of tears, abandonment, even the tiny 2-year-old children dressed in black. The whole family came together for the funeral as my grandfather's body was brought from Karlsbad. It was a terrible sight, a terrible welcome, especially when the grandfather's body was brought in and the uncle, his son, entered the room with grandfather's faithful and very affectionate servant who was at his death. Such terrible weeping and moaning could be heard in the vast rooms of the palace that it is difficult to describe what was going on in my heart. I felt all this very much. I understood it. But what bothered me most at that time was how vain, transistent everything is. Today it is, tomorrow it is gone. Everything disappears, ends. So, you see, that was a very important person in her life. She lost somebody who was really played an important role as a child, still a young girl. And that made her feel that there must be other things in life that never end. That we shouldn't rely on this reality of this world and achievements and successes, that are important in this world. It's interesting that I managed to find in the archives the old obituaries, because he was a prominent person. So we can see from the obituaries what was the situation, how the funeral looked like, etc. So here you have. I'm not going to read because. But also the Polish text is a bit, it's 19th century and there are abbreviations. They wanted to make it very short. I was trying to decipher it. In English, it's probably a bit clumsy here, but you can have a look yourself. And there are all the medals and recognitions he had. So you know that he was a very important person. And we know that from the obituary, that he lived. He died in Karlsbad, gone to the waters to recuperate. And here's this bit in the first one that I told you that he was buried in the family tomb. And this is even more interesting because it describes the funeral itself. And we know that this archbishop that helped to find a place for Mother Francis's confirmation was the main celebrant from here. And the funeral took part in the Capuchin Fathers Church, Miodowa Street. You can see it was not a simple funeral. They were buried somebody important. The same cemetery, there are two other graves connected with Siedliski's family. We won't go deep into the details, but just to let you know, the last person who bear the name Siedliski, because we don't have Siedliskis anymore, at least not related to Mother Francis. So the last one was the son of, Adam's son, nephew of Blessed Francis Siedliska, Adolf Siedliski, died childless in 1945. He's buried here. And also her brother had a daughter, Cecilia. And this daughter, Adam died suddenly. And Cecilia was, I think, still a baby or something. So there are a lot of letters between Mother Francis and her and Adam's wife. Mother Francis was trying to support her. And also there's one cute letter when she writes that they sent a photo of this Cecilia to her. And they put a handkerchief on her head so that she's so like Mother, she resembles Mother Francis, that she is like, her physical features are more like Mother Francis's. So she was really happy about that she had this niece. So this niece is buried here, and also her children that were girls. And the last one we were in touch with, that she gave us a lot of these things from the Szczaryman, was Barbara Gerutto. There is still one lady who, her daughter, Barbara's Gerutto daughter, we are in touch with. And I know that there is, she also had a son who lives somewhere in the United States. And I don't know if sisters from the States have some contact or not, I have no idea. So that's this part, a 19th century postcard for you to see the places. Actually, we talked about all of these places in the picture. So, because all of those places are really in the very center of Warsaw. She was they're close, can go for a walk. So that's the sister. This is the first part about her life before becoming a religious. We just mentioned the first step. So I think we can take a little bit of a break before the second part, that we're going to talk about something else, about her religious life. I just wanted to tell you that I prepared a book, Francis Siedliska Warsaw, but unfortunately it's only in Polish. But I'm going to leave it with you, and all these places, and I think even more, are described here. So if you would like to have a look with colorful pictures. So.